driving on the highway, and I don't know if you've been to South Florida, but when it rains, it's not like it's a deluge, right? Like this is not raining like most places rain. So why are we not collecting that water? And, I started looking into this, and sure enough, you just published a chapter, which I want you to tell us how people can read that, because there's a way for them to request to read the chapter. I couldn't find it with like a free link to connect it, but we'll get to that. So I'm glad to know I'm not crazy, that this is actually well, okay, I am, but not because of rainwater collection. But so would you talk a little bit about what rainwater collection could even be used for on a municipal level? Like what can we even do with that?
Yeah, so I think on a municipal level, a lot of it would be looking at the same types of things we use reclaimed water for. So a lot of what we call the non-potable uses, which are the irrigation, toilet flushing, laundry, cooling towers are really a huge use of water that we don't always take into account. There are possibilities to use harvested rainwater for drinking water. Obviously, that comes under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act at that point and adds additional regulations, but it's possible, right? I mean, it's a very viable water source. And when you mentioned the Florida rains, I actually went to college in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I had some time with the rains of Florida. And that is one of the challenges with harvesting rainwater is it's a much more pulsed supply than a lot of other water supplies. But that doesn't make it impossible. That means we need to figure out how we store it effectively and harvest it effectively, given that it comes in really large deluges sometimes, and then maybe a few days without it, and then a lot of water again. So there's lots of ways to think about how we can use this water on a larger scale. There are also opportunities for municipalities to help contribute to funding for smaller rainwater harvesting systems and really integrate it into their overall water plan. That's one of the things that we're starting to see, is that if you think about it as really a part of the overall municipal water supply, whether it's handled at the municipal level or supported municipally, but distributed strategically to businesses and homeowners and things like that, that can be another really viable way to work it and help reduce flooding.
Is there anywhere that has this? I'm just curious, what is there anywhere that this has been done successfully outside of just residential?
So there are lots of places where rainwater harvesting has been done in institutional and commercial settings. So lots of businesses, lots of elementary schools, high schools. If you think about like an elementary school, you have a lot of roof area usually. So a lot of surface area to collect, lots of need for toilet flushing and other non-potable uses. And during the times of year when you have less students around and don't need the water for toilet flushing and things like that, you usually have a lot of need for irrigation. So you have this really lovely setup of need for water year round, need for non-potable water year round, and a lot of area to collect it.
Sarah, what is the biggest impediment to us being able to do local municipal rainwater collection?
I think, one is figuring out a regulatory approach to it. How do we decide what is safe enough? As you mentioned, we do have to think about safety with water. We've seen that with Flint. We've seen that around the country. When we're thinking about non-potable water, the challenges are much smaller than they are for potable water, but we still have to think about that. And I think dealing with how we store it, because again, you get this huge deluge and then you might not get rain for a while. And how do we integrate that well into what's really a pretty aging infrastructure for all of our water systems across the country?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we definitely have a huge infrastructure problem in this country, and that is one of the big problems, maybe the biggest problem with why Flint has suffered the way that it has. I think it's safe to say that if we did have, a better handle on infrastructure in this country, that some of the problems would be mitigated. But this seems to me like a really common sense approach to dealing with it. There's also parts of the country, particularly Florida, which gets the most rainfall in the United States. It could be a very profitable industry selling water to other parts of the country, particularly places like Nevada and California and Arizona that have a huge problem with droughts. So, to me, this is all, I think it's just an example of runaway capitalism where They don't want they do not want working class people tapping into something like this, and only big business should have their hands in. That's what I see.
And we've definitely seen a lot of kind of embracing of this as a new field for people working. We've seen plumbers unions doing a lot of training in people getting set up to do rainwater harvesting systems, laborers unions really saying, this is an emerging technology that we think will have jobs in the future. This is a way to sort of differentiate yourself and do something that's both environmentally and economically beneficial.
Talk a little bit about your chapter, or well, first talk about the book as a whole. Because I know that there was this whole book written that I'm assuming is like very thick, because I can see that your chapter alone is long. So like, just talk a little bit about this book and what your contribution was, and about like the study that you did, because I know that you really looked at like what percentage of usage can we really get from doing this, like realistically.
So yeah, so the whole thing, it's a large book that was put together by a group of editors looking at resilient water management in urban settings. And so what are all of the different things we can do to better manage our water in cities, thinking about all of the ways that we use and pollute water in cities? How do we bring all that together? And a colleague from Longwood University, Kathy G, and I wrote a chapter together thinking about how do we maximize the benefits of rainwater harvesting. And one of the biggest things that we see is the way we maximize the benefits is by using it. I think there's sometimes a mantra of, if you have this rainwater harvesting system, you really want to save the water. And obviously we want to conserve water. However, if you can use that water instead of other water for your uses and make space for the next storm, that's much better. And that's one of the sort of mindset changes with rainwater harvesting is when we have it, let's preferentially use that and then use the more traditional sources when we need to. So it's sort of offsetting those and letting us save those for another time. So, it's kind of site dependent, obviously, how much we can use. When you have a place like lots of South Florida where you have lots of rainfall, you can apply a large portion of the demand, particularly that non-potable demand, the non-drinking water demand. And again, I want to be clear, you absolutely can treat harvested rainwater to be drinking water. There's actually a company that bottles harvested rainwater now and sells it as a bottled water. So it is absolutely can be done. It is done less commonly, partially because for a lot of our businesses, in our homes, most of what we need water for are actually these non-potable uses. They're sort of a bigger percentage of our use. And so if we can remove a lot of that from our demand on the traditional water supply, we make a huge dent sort of in how much we're having to pull on that traditional water supply.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.